Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and again, we're going to try this in a coffee shop. So it's kind of fun to mix it up. I'm not in my usual leopard chair. I'm not in the comfort of my home in my studio, but I think this is kind of fun, and I get to have a guest today that I think you are going to love. Welcome, Mark Hugentobler.
Thanks, Mary. Glad to be here.
Well, I want to make sure I said that name right.
You did.
I did.
Right on.
Okay. Is it German?
Swiss German.
Swiss German, yeah. My German is, my heritage is German-Irish. So I have a little bit of German in me, about 50%.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I've got Swiss German and Scottish. So.
Oh, a little Scottish.
Yeah.
I'm really into that. I don't know why. I haven't ever been before. I mean, we're all Americans, and that's that.
We are.
But I've just enjoyed researching mine and actually going back to some of these places and feeling connected to the earth. That there was something about understanding where I came from.
Yeah, your roots are important. I've always thought that.
So here we are, two odd ducks.
Especially me.
Especially me. And we each do podcasts.
Yep.
So let's discuss, so our listeners know, what brought us together. You have a podcast named what?
All My Friends Are Felons.
Yeah. So when you reached out to me and said, hey, I would like to be a guest on your podcast, you can look at mine here. All my guests are felons, or all my friends are felons. I thought, okay, this guy, no matter what, is going to be interesting.
I've been called a lot of things, Mary. Interesting's not one of them.
Well, it's an interesting title because, of course, I was drawn to it. Of what do you mean all your friends are felons? And so let's start with that. A little bit about your background and what led you to produce a podcast called All My Friends Are Felons.
Well, before the podcast, there was a book,
Yes.
All My Friends Are Felons. But I was real brief. I was born in a white picket fence life. My dad was a dentist. My mom was stay at home. I had 5 siblings. I had great friends. Grew up in a small town in southern Utah. I think I mentioned to you the worst trouble I really ever got in was breaking my dog out of the dog pound.
Yeah.
When he got picked up by the cops. We were mischievous and we did dumb things and we made some mistakes, but by and large we didn't really hurt anybody.
Right.
I grew up in that world. Went on mission for my church to France. Spent a couple years there. I got home. I came home, played a little basketball at Snow College, found my wife.
He's kind of tall, if you didn't know that already. When he walked in, I was like, okay, this guy's played some sports.
But my wife and I were married, finished school. I went to be a basketball coach. And that's what I always wanted to do. And we did that for 23 years in a couple different places. Very successful. In fact, this week we had our 30th year reunion for the first state championship we won.
Oh, that's awesome.
We went down to a little town called Monticello, and all the kids came. They're not kids anymore. They're men. They're 50 years old. But we all came and enjoyed each other's time and had a little reunion. Anyway, that was my world. I did that for 23 years. And then my world kind of got changed.
The moment.
Yeah, drastically changed.
Everybody has a moment in their life. Most of us have a lot of moments, but this sounds like kind of a first one for you where there was a shift in what your direction was.
A real shift. Yeah, we people don't realize probably in Utah, the local school districts are in charge of the prison education programs. So when the school was at Draper, for example, Jordan School District was in charge of the program. Now Salt Lake School District's in charge of the prison program out west of the airport. Well, in Gunnison, there's a prison down in Gunnison, and the South San Pete School District is in charge of that prison. And they take care of the education there. And it's not uncommon for teachers and principals, administrators to go in and out of the prison. Sometimes they do it for a lot of different reasons. But, for example, the man that was there before me is now the superintendent of the school district.
Huh.
So he came out, he was in the high school, and then he went to the prison, then he went to the junior high school, then in the district office, and now he's a superintendent. So it's not uncommon for people to go in and out, usually voluntarily.
So the school districts are creating programs for education to the inmates.
Yes, that's
okay?
correct. And they're responsible for the education programs, not the programming. There's a part of the prison system that does programming, and that's different. That's what the prison and the officers do. This is actually education, high school education, just like you see in a school.
So they can get their GED.
And often a high school diploma.
Yeah,
They do both.
that's great.
And it's a good program. It wasn't. I had no interest in it. But as a high school basketball coach, you often make friends, make a lot of friends, but you also make some not so good friends. There was a couple of members of the school board who's one boy I cut from the team, another boy didn't get the accolades that his mother thought he should get. And anyway, they were friends of mine. And then I got kind of sideways with my principal. I was the assistant principal, and we didn't see eye to eye with education. And I don't want to get into that. It's not important. Anyway, they sentenced me to prison. They said, Mark, you're going to be the principal in the prison. And I said, I don't want to go. They said, well, you don't have a choice. You can get a different job, go work somewhere else, or you can go to prison. I was pretty upset. I was not very happy. I had never had much of a positive consideration for prisoner inmates. They're bad people. They're horrible people. Nobody wants to be around them. They've hurt people. Why should I have anything to do with them?
And the biggest piece is people don't think they can trust them.
And you can't. That's
There's
true.
No trust.
No trust. The corrections program, the corrections system is doing all it can to help them, and they're so derelict and so backwards that they're unredeemable. That was my perception. The superintendent told me that, Mark, that if I'd go in and do a couple of years, do my time, that I could get back out in the public education world and do what I enjoy doing, which is working with teenagers, helping kids.
So you saw your time at the prison as an actual sentence
It was
someone
a sentence.
gave to you.
And
you went with your feet dragging.
Absolutely.
You were pulled in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got there, and within first I just thought, well, I'm just going to do my time. But I'm not very good at that because I'm kind of a high energy person.
Oh, really? I hadn't noticed that.
I'm
like, this guy's the same as me.
I have a hard time sitting still.
Yeah,
my mind's going all the
yeah.
time. And so I'm sitting there. I thought, well, maybe I'll learn Spanish. But then I thought, I'm getting paid to do this. I got to do my job. And so I started looking around, and I started meeting some of the inmates. One in particular named Charles Gordon, who I invited in my office, and we started talking. And I got to know this man, and I invited others in, and more. And I realized that I could go golfing with him. He's just like this buddy, or I played basketball with a guy just like him. We're good friends.
Yeah.
And I started realizing that most of these men now were sober. They had looking forward, I realized that most of them were addicts. They had addiction problems, drug problems. And I realized that they were just like my friends on the streets that had never had those problems. I also started to realize that most of them, if not all of them, came from serious trauma. Not just trauma like my daddy beat me or my mom hit me with a wooden spoon, but serious trauma that some of them, I don't know how they survived.
Yeah, how are you even standing upright and walking?
Yeah. How are you sane?
Yeah.
And so my paradigm started to shift. And within about 4 months, I thought, this is backwards. And the correction system that was supposed to be helping these guys isn't helping them at all. It was hopeless. The inmates had no hope. They were just drudging along every day. They were hiding. A lot of them, not the ones that I was working with, but a lot of them out there were using drugs. They get drugs in prison, and they escape with different forms of criminal activity, just like they did in the streets. Addiction is almost always addiction is a process of hiding or covering trauma or problems that people face that they can't deal with. That's where it starts. And then it becomes an addiction. It takes over their body, takes over their choice, and puts them down roads that when they're sane, when they're healthy, they would never go there.
Right.
And so I thought, man, this is crazy. So we started, and the officers in my faculty thought I was crazy. We had a corridor with 14 classrooms, and my office was right in the middle on the corner. It was a glass bubble, had windows everywhere. And the officers come and said, you can't have these guys in your office. It's not safe. I said, well, why? Well, they could do something to you. I said, okay, look at me. I'm not afraid of them physically.
Yeah.
And you're right there. It's a window. I mean, the door's open, the windows are everywhere. What are they going to do? Well, it's just different, Mark. I said, well, okay, but I want to find it.
Different is good.
Different is good.
Because
we got to change the system.
Quo hasn't been working.
And anyway, so we just kept doing that, and we created a council. We expanded our education program. We had 247 students when I started. Within a couple of years, we doubled that to 500 plus. When I left 8 years later, we had over 1,100 students.
Wait a minute. I thought your sentence was 2 years.
Well, I didn't.
You stayed for 8.
I extended my sentence. It was. And when the opportunity came to leave, I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I stayed there. I stayed there by choice. Not many people. In fact, I go back every Monday morning. I go back into the Gunnison prison, and I teach a class called Captain Your Story that is helping these men. You talked about earlier off the air about how you kind of got into what you're doing to help people realize they don't have to be victims, but they can be creators. And that's what this program, Captain Your Story, does, is it takes people, and it's not just for felons, it works for anyone. It takes them from being victims and just taking life as it comes and the hard knocks and rolling with the punches kind of thing. And it turns you into a creator where you actually create your life and you dictate. I mean, you can't control life. No one can, but you can dictate to life what you want, and you can pursue and create in your own life.
And what you can do with life, though, is you may not be able to control all the circumstances around you, but you can 100% control
yourself.
That's right.
Exactly.
And, we all know all the things as a man thinketh and those kind of things behind that picture. But as living a life of victim, their entire life, seeing generations in their family being victims, they don't know how to live any other way. They don't see the path. And we think well, just go on that path. Well, I don't know how to get on that path. But to you and I
is obvious.
Yeah.
That path is so obvious.
Get a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Be responsible.
Stay sober. What?
Well, it's so simple, isn't it?
My
God. But they've never seen that example. Many of them have never. Their example. I interviewed a guy, Luke Jensen. His first memory is watching his dad beat his mom's boyfriend with a hammer. That's the first thing he remembers. Think back in your memory. The first thing I remember is playing in the backyard in Kansas City, Missouri, with my brother, sliding down this big old hill behind our apartment. Yeah. That's the first thing I remember, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I remember going across the street and playing G.I. Joes in the park, over in the poison ivy, because my mom said, "Don't get in the poison ivy, boys." Well, of course we did, but that's my first memories. His first memory is watching his dad beat a guy with a hammer.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. We don't realize that these men most of them are victims. And
I venture to say almost all of them at some point have been a victim.
And we all get victimized, and we all have things in our youth that are traumatizing. But when imagine growing up and your mom and dad are druggies, or you don't even know your dad. Your mom's a druggie, and your mom starts you on meth. There's stories like that when you're 10-year-old kids. I'm going, how does he survive?
For me, that's one of the hardest things to realize. And when you hear stories, the physical pain that I feel from that kind of empathetic touch of realizing the kind of trauma that they've experienced that I've only read about.
Yeah.
And I was talking to another person the other day out at the prison out west of the airport. And I said, how many of your inmates here have experienced childhood sexual abuse? And she said to me, she thought for a minute and she said, I pretty much think I have to say 100%.
Pretty close.
I was like, what? She said, yeah. And she went on to say, one inmate out here told me that one of his earliest memories was he can't remember anything before this. That's a crazy thing. He can't remember anything before the age of 7 and hearing his dad come down the hallway to rape him. And that changes people.
You know, how does that happen?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, we just don't realize the trauma. And again, my trauma, my family's trauma, we had trauma, but it was my mom chasing us with the wooden spoon. You know,
I had the yardstick.
and there were other things that were not healthy,
Yeah,
but by and large, it wasn't that.
it wasn't that.
You know, and hurt people, and we don't realize at a very young age, most of these people have been hurt.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about the women's side because that victimization went right through from their childhood right into adulthood in some very serious and sad ways, where men had some choices and started to do a lot of more victimizing, turning it on others. In the women's side, most of those women just kind of stayed victims, and they have always been down that road. But it's really it's a sad thing. What we don't realize is that 95% of the people that are incarcerated in Utah will eventually be released from prison. 95%. Of those released, 72% go back within 5 years.
Yeah.
So 28% of the people that are released from prison succeed. We put them in there, and we think that isolating them from society and taking them away from their families and all that kind of stuff and punishing them, they're going to magically resolve the issues that they've
and develop the skill set to change.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen in a prison.
No, it doesn't.
Unless there's dedicated programs and people who are committed to them.
And we find, something I found there, and I believe this with all people. I think when we all go down crazy, cruddy roads. Usually it's not the serious trauma that a lot of these men and women face.
Yeah.
But we make dumb decisions. We sell out good things for bad things. We all make those kinds of decisions. But I would say a lot of your listeners, a lot of my listeners come from a place where we know the road. We know where the road is, and we know when we finally come to ourselves, which is a key part. We come to ourselves and there's the road. Got to go get back on the road. I got to go back home. I got to go back to the things I know. Well, when these guys come to themselves, they go back to what they know. What they know is very, very, very broken.
Yeah.
They're normal.
Yeah.
They're normal, and our normal, or I think I can speak for you, Mary, are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And they don't know. They think many of them think the people on the East Bench that have a lot of nice things, they stole it. They cheated somebody.
Yeah.
They lied. They got ill-gotten gains.
Yeah.
And that's what they really believe, because they don't realize that there's a path of normal that is healthy and is productive and that creates and that builds.
So I think I told you just before we started this podcast that in another life, I was a parole officer.
Yeah, you did.
And I did that for 5 years before I decided I wanted to start my own company and be the maker of my own destiny as opposed to working for the state.
Good for you.
But I worked in that program, Mark, for 5 years. And I saw a lot of people. I had a lot of on my intake list, and I would go visit them. I mean, a parole officer's job is to help them when they're in the prison, get ready for their outside life. And then once they get outside, then to help them, manage them, monitor them. I hated that part of it. You know what I mean? And
babysitting adult men.
Yeah. But it's in that 5 years, I look back and I can think, I did not have one success. And to this day, that breaks my heart. Yeah. Because I have different tools now. Me as a person, if I were the parole officer today, I would have a completely different skill set. And I would be more likely able to help. And that's what I think you have developed. You have developed a skill set that can help these people. And not just abandon them, not just lock them up till their time is done and then lock them up later. You, I can tell you see each one as a true individual and a person.
All my friends are all my friends are felons, Mary.
Yeah.
And I think the skill set you're talking about is empathy and perspective. The thing that's changed in me is I've gone from thinking them as being terrible, awful, horrendous people that if they would just pull their head out of their fanny, they would be normal.
Yep.
To realizing why they're there, and realizing what got them there, and realizing that they really don't know the way. I want to tell you a story. It's in my book. I call it the violin story, and it's the impetus for.
I love this story.
Have you
I read
it
on your
on
your thing, and I thought, I hope you share that story. Yes.
I went in 2016. The Department of Corrections had a symposium in Salt Lake Community College, and it was the one time in my 8-year experience that I thought, "There's hope. These people are starting to get it," and it really was a positive thing. Governor Herbert initiated it. And it was a very positive thing, but it was stymied within 6 months. But anyway, they had a bunch of speakers come to the auditorium at the college. Judges, a state senator came. I don't remember everyone, but one person in particular was a former inmate, a felon. And he told his story. He said he grew up, his first memories are in Montana, lived with his mom, his sister, and his mom's boyfriend. And they had a baby. And within a couple of months, the boyfriend bailed. And so they're up there all alone. And mom came back to Ogden, where she was from, living somewhere between Harrison and Washington and south of Brinker.
Okay. I picture
Is that okay? Yep. So he grew up, all of a sudden he went from remote Montana to inner city Utah, if I can say that. It's just just kind of a hard place. I lived on Brinker when I went to Weber State, so I kind of know.
Yeah, picture that.
But he didn't have much. His mom was trying to make ends meet and her family was around, but he didn't talk a lot about that. Well, he started stealing clothes off the clothesline, so he had clothes to wear. And then he stole a bike. And he realized that there were people that would pay him for bikes. So he started stealing bikes and selling them. Of course, then that gets to drugs and everything else. He's in and out of juvenile detention. At 18, he gets his first charge and goes to prison for drugs, for distribution. Well, he's now 28, 8 years later. He's going back for the 5th time.
Wow. And
he's in front of the same judge, and the judge is disgusted. And the judge looks at him and says, "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" And the guy, I would say kid, he was a man, 28 years old, kind of looked down, looked up at the judge and says, "Can I ask you a question?" The judge said, "Sure." So the man says, "Can you play the violin?" The judge says, "No." "What if I ask you to play the Star Spangled Banner on the violin? Could you do it?" He said, "No." "What if I put a gun to your head?" Said, "If you don't play the Star Spangled Banner on this violin, I'm going to kill you. Could you do it?" He said, "No, I absolutely could not." He says, "What if I threatened your family the same way?" He says, "That's ridiculous. I can't but play the violin. I never learned how." And so the man kind of looked down and looked back up at the judge and pleaded, "I never learned how to live a good life. Could you teach me?" It was funny because obviously the judge decided to take a different avenue with him, got him into some rehab, got him well. He's standing there on this stage. On the stage with him is his wife and 2 beautiful children. He's been 10 years out of prison, 10 years out of the system. He's got a business. He's having a good life. He's paying taxes. He's contributing to society. He's not, and I heard that story. I got home. I got back to the prison in Gunnison, and a lot of the people that were there I knew, and I said, "Hey, what do you think of the symposium?" "Oh, it was all right." "What about that felon that told the story?" "What story?" And I'm going, did I make this up in my head? And thankfully, I found a good friend that was there, and she told me the same story, so I knew it was real. But that is so telling.
Yeah.
They don't, and they just don't know what our lives are like. They don't know the life of someone who's healthy and lives a healthy life, and they want to.
They want to.
They want to. That's what we don't realize is they want to. I go into Monday mornings and into Gunnison, and we work with a lot of different inmates, and we have a guy in there named Chris who's a member of the white supremacist gang, and he's a big man. He makes me look small, and he's tough and he's mean, and I've watched him over about an 8-week period completely change his direction in his life.
Really?
From being I'm going to take what I want and you get out of my way, and to a person who's got some compassion and some kindness and some consideration.
In just 8 weeks?
8 weeks. And he's not done. He's still got, we're probably 12 weeks in. It's a 24-week course. And so by the time we get to 24 weeks, I'm pretty confident this man will be realizing that he can control his destiny without destroying other people.
That's a key concept.
Yes.
We teach that a lot here on this podcast.
But
that you can craft your own life without leaving a wave of destruction behind you.
Yeah.
And instead creating a wave that flows with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That helps you,
lifts you.
That pushes you forward.
Yeah.
That empowers you. So,
Mark, I love this story.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did that guy change? And is that program teachable, transferable, usable in a bigger setting than Gunnison? I mean, not that I'm not wanting Gunnison to succeed.
You're talking about Chris, the white supremacist guy?
Yeah.
Well, we are right now actually in front of going to the legislature trying to pass a bill to get that program funded so that we can come into the facility and teach it. Typically, corrections wants their officers to do all the teaching. And they never stop to realize that the officers are the enemy.
Yeah.
Would you go to a class and listen to someone who you thought was your arch enemy and learn a thing?
Nope.
The reason that this works for us is that all of the people who are going in now are volunteering. We've been doing it for about 2 years in Gunnison, and Salt Lake, we've been doing it about 6 months. We have 3 classes down there, and I'm not sure if there's 2 or 3 in Salt Lake. And we go in as volunteers. It's a professional program. It's an accredited program. It's merit-based. It's a very, very solid thing. And we just teach it, and we're hoping to get it funded. And if we can get it funded, we'll expand it and we'll do it bigger.
I love that.
I just read a letter. This one didn't come to our group. It's all my felons, friends or felons group. That's not the same group. That's just me. But this Captain Your Story group, we have a friend, Paige Norton, who is in this space and works with a lot of Polynesian people. I don't know if you've heard of Paige.
Yeah, I have.
She's a wonderful lady. She received a letter from a man who was taking the class in Salt Lake, and I don't know who the man was. And I'll just paraphrase. He said, "This is amazing. This should be presented and taught to every person, every individual that comes in immediately before they get to the general population, so that they can see before they start to get thrown into the cesspool that there's a different way to live." And he just went on and on about it. And that was just a page. That wasn't to us, or there was no agenda behind that. He was just telling his story. So I'm a firm believer in it. There are so many better ways to do what the corrections is doing. And I don't want to be critical. In fact, the reason this is starting to happen is Brian Redd. I didn't mention this. I think I did it before. We have a new executive director in the prison system in Utah. His name's Brian Redd.
Yes.
And Brian Redd played basketball for me 35 years ago. So we have a long history. And when I found out he was appointed to this position, I came and visited with him. And he is making amazing strides to create opportunity, just like Captain Your Story, for inmates to change. And he's taking a completely different philosophy. He has completely changed the C-suite in the organization. He is working he's in the prisons a lot. He goes and visits with the inmates. We had a Thursday night meeting, late August, with the men who have gone through this program I just described.
Right.
And they basically bore their testimonials of what's happened to them. And it brought tears to his eyes, to the senator's eyes.
That's amazing.
It was powerful.
I love that.
And you hear men who have killed people, who have raped people, who have done unbelievably horrible things, most of which, and I'm not making an excuse, because you hurt somebody, you hurt somebody,
Yeah.
but most of which were under the influence of something. Not just a one-time thing, but a complete addict, overtaken by addiction.
Yeah.
And you see these men who are broken, and they're repairing themselves. And they, for the first time in their lives, for a long time, they see themselves as redeemable and even lovable. You know, we don't realize a lot of times what we see is a front. They're broken men who have no value in their own hearts. And so they put on this big, tough front to see, look who I am.
I always say, and I used to tell this to my children, the tougher the child, the student, your friend appears, the weaker they are inside,
Yeah,
the more
more
fear
broken.
there is. That's the only tool they know to be enough.
Yep. And that's right. And so we watch these men who are just broken, and they break them. We don't really break them down in the program. They break themselves down, but in the process of breaking themselves down, they build themselves back up, and they see themselves as children of God, as people who can be good people, people who can create, people who can achieve, people who can be loved, because they don't see themselves lovable.
At all.
They're not loved. Nobody should love them. They're not deserving of any love. And suddenly they realize they are. And it's life-changing.
It is life-changing when you realize I'm enough, I'm worthy, someone might love me just for me, and all those things.
Yeah.
Brian, we're out of time today, but this is such an important topic. I would love to have you back another time. If people want to know more about your program and want to follow your podcast and buy your book, let's talk all about that.
Well, the book's called All My Friends Are Felons, and it's available on Amazon and Audible.
So we'll put that link at the end of the podcast so you can find that most intriguing book, All My Friends Are Felons.
And it's co-authored by two felons. So I wrote the book, but there's two felons who helped me write it, and their experience and their insights. And it's not raw. I'm not a raw person. I'm not into true crime, but it's real.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really into. The podcast is called All My Friends Are Felons, and we interview men and women who have been through the criminal justice system. They tell their stories. Yeah. Again, we don't get into the deep, ugly parts of the crime. We tell their story of where it started, how they grew, where they went south, what happened while they were south, what happened while they were in a mess. And then we spent a lot of time talking about where they came to themselves and realized, I don't want this. I got to figure out a way to change, and how they overcame incredible odds. And now we're living a life. They're your neighbor. You don't even know it because they're living good lives.
Yeah. And
they were men and women who did some pretty terrible things and went through, I don't want to say what they just did, but they also went through some pretty horrendous things. And then they did some terrible things, but now they've come out the other side and they're living a good life.
We're back to that old adage, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Yep. And all we're asking is for people to be aware, and for us in this position to give them a hand, to allow the healing to happen.
Get out of their way.
Yeah.
but yeah, provide opportunity. And speaking of that opportunity, Captain Your Story is an example of a program that I've been working with for a year now. The program's been around for 15 years, so it's not like it's a brand new thing. It fits all modes of life. We have a program for teenagers. We have a program for families. We have a program for mothers who are struggling. We have a program for the average person. We teach it to C-suite people.
So how do people find access to this program?
It's called Captain Your Story.
Captain Your Story.
It's the base program is called My Story Matters. They can go to my website, All My Friends Are Felons, and find a link there.
This is part of My Story Matters.
Are you familiar with My Story Matters?
Just a little bit.
Well, I can't wait to hear that.
That's for the next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to start working with Amy Chandler.
Wonderful lady.
Isn't she a gem? She's the person I asked about how many of the people that you work with have been sexually abused as a child.
Wonderful, wonderful woman.
And I read about, I've now several people in that organization. And I've thought, to be honest with you, Mark, when I'm done with this podcast, whatever that is, maybe this year or next year, that's where I want to do. I want to come full circle. I want to come back. I want help.
Well, we need people. We're hoping to get funding to take this into the prison and really make a difference. Really change. And we're not changing anybody. We're just giving them a path to change, and they're changing themselves, which is life. You can't change me, and I can't change you.
No.
We can influence.
Yeah.
But we can't. But
and support.
I have to do the But I have to do the work to change Mark. Mark has to do the work. Mary has to do the work. Amy has to do the work. Chris has to do the work. Whoever it is, they have to do the work. But they're going to do work, whether it's good work or bad work. And the key is putting on a path where they can do good work.
Mark, so how do people find access to this? Because I know my listeners are thinking, I know someone who could benefit this. I want to listen to this podcast. I want to know more. I want to read his book. How do people find you?
Well, All My Friends Are Felons. That's the book. It's on Amazon. It's also on Audible. I read it on. You'll have to excuse me. I did the reading. Everybody said that I needed to do it. So
I love that.
So that's two places you can find the book. Our podcast is All My Friends Are Felons. You can get it on Apple Plus. You can get it on Spotify, any podcast company that puts out podcasts. We usually drop 2 a week, Tuesday and Thursday.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
So we have a lot of interviews. And in that we just interview men and women who have been through this system. Most of them started in pretty ugly places and fought their way, and finally they came out on the other side, and they're living good lives. They're productive. They're doing good things. They're paying taxes and all that kind of stuff. The Captain Your Story stuff comes from an organization called My Story Matters.
What?
Yeah.
Amy Chandler's?
Yes, Amy Chandler.
What are you talking about?
Yep.
I love her.
Yeah.
We've been friends for a long time.
She's an amazing lady.
She is. And I have wanted to be involved with that organization. Maybe at a point in time when I'm no longer doing this podcast, I'll have a little extra time and I'll be able to do that because, as you can see, you thought before you got here today that you and I were about as different as they come. But in reality, we're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
We walked and we learned lessons, and now we're here to lift others.
Yeah. Well, and we just, we just want to. I want to change this world. I just want this world. Maybe a better way to say it is I want this world to change.
And Mark, the thing I've learned about changing this world is the very first thing in changing the world is changing me. I had a vision of oneness, that this world, the answer to every single problem that we encounter is to claim oneness. And I was just like, how am I going to do that? That is like, that's not even possible. What are you talking about? And the next day I had an experience where I saw someone, I rolled my eyes and thought, does she even know how she's dressed out here in public? And I just stopped. I was like, that's how we do it. We first start with ourselves.
Yeah.
I have to eliminate within myself the distance between me and you.
Right.
And that you are the same, and I am the same. I see you, I see me. There's not that distance that, for so many of us, it's ingrained to create within us.
And it's sad.
It is.
We're a lot more the same than we are different, whether it's politics or religion or societal views. We're just so much more the same than we are different, and we just focus on what's different. And that's part of what kills this space, is we want to, and it's, it's a big difference. I'm not going to say it's not, but until we, I hit this paradigm shift about 15 years ago that really changed my world. It just completely changed my world. It didn't, I don't know how, if it changed me, I guess it did. It sure changed my perceptions and my understanding.
That's changing you.
And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And our podcast, my podcast, All My Friends Are Felons, my goal is to help the white picket fence people of our world see the real picture.
Right.
And understand that we have, as white picket fence people, we have a responsibility to society to help to change the broken system to a system that allows broken people to get better.
I love that. Craft your meaningful life around that this week. Help broken people heal, get better, lift up, because that will be one of the biggest things in crafting your meaningful life. When you heal yourself, the next thing is all about healing others. Mark, thank you for being with me today.
Thanks for having me, Mary.
And we'll include all the links to Mark's things at the end of this podcast so you can connect with him again. And don't be surprised if we have Mark on again. Thank you.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.